I think one question I want to answer, and I think Mr. Devesh Jha, आपने ये सवाल पूछा था कि ऐसी किताब लिखनी चाहिए क्या? तो ये जो सवाल है, मैंने भी काफ़ी इसके बारे में सोचा और सोच के मुझे ये लगा कि भारत नेपाल संबंध जो है ट्रांसपेरेंट होने चाहिए। हम लोगों के बीच में क्या होता है कि एक दूसरे से बात नहीं करते, इधर उधर आगे पीछे देखते रहते हैं, और कई चीज़ें जो थोड़ी मुश्किल होती हैं उनको हम लोग इंग्लिश में कहते हैं यू पुट देम अंडर द कार्पेट, सो यू डोंट डिस्कस दीज इश्यूज। एंड माई अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज दैट वी नीड टू बी मोर ट्रांसपेरेंट. I think we need to look at the issues that unite us, build on those issues, and try and resolve those issues that divide us. So, एक मेरा message जो है वो यही है कि we must strengthen our engagement at all levels and especially amongst the youth of our country. बिकॉज जो ये हिस्टोरिकल बैगेज है हमारे रिलेशनशिप में, जो मैंने कहा मिसपरसेप्शंस हैं, प्रेजुडिसेस हैं, मिसट्रस्ट है, तो इन चीज़ों ये हमारे जेनरेशन के लोगों में हो सकता है. जो नई जेनरेशन आ रही है, उन्होंने दुनिया देखी है, आपने जिक्र किया इंटरनेट की दुनिया है, सो दे आर लिविंग इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट वर्ल्ड, दे आर लिविंग इन अ वेरी डिफरेंट कॉन्टेक्स्ट. So clearly our relationship has now to be located in this new environment, new international environment, new geopolitical environment. तो इस संदर्भ में how are we going to navigate this relationship in a way that it mutually benefits both people? So the first point I want to respond to Mr. Devesh Jha, I feel there should be much more transparency in the relationship. And I think it's important that we discuss all matters. Just one instance I'll give you. Hamare, we have a lot of projects in Nepal. And, many projects get delayed. So then we hear in the, Nepalese media, oh, this Indian project, they promise a lot of things, they don't deliver anything, nothing happens. So the impression that everyone here gets, oh, it's obviously the Indians are not interested, or, they're shoddy in their workmanship or their work and so on. On the other hand, our people engaged in those projects tell us that the Nepalese have not done this. We have asked the Nepalese to give us, clearance of the land, we don't get it. We have other issues, our imports of various products that we need, we are not getting customs exemption. So the point is, all this happens and some of it comes out in the public. So what we decided to do was set up a committee which meets every 3 months. It has people from the Nepalese side, it has people from the Indian side. All stakeholders are there. And we discuss all the projects and see what are the problems in each project. And then the concerned officials have to tell us why there is this problem, what can be done to resolve this problem, who is responsible to resolve it, by when will it be resolved. So we write down all this. Then 3 months later we again meet. And we got this idea from our Prime Minister of India conducts something called the Pragati meeting. Every few months, all the major projects of the country, he monitors personally and they have this discussion. So we felt, why don't we do this at the level of the two governments? So that, otherwise what happens is there's a lot of blame game, mudslinging, it comes out in the public, and that vitiates the atmosphere. So I am all for greater transparency and greater engagement. And the other thing I wanted to mention is also, please read the book. Please don't be misled by what you see on social media or sometimes in the newspapers, because, sometimes things get distorted or misrepresented. So it's very important for you to form your own opinions on the basis of the book. So I know that on this IGP matter, there was such a hue and cry. I was away actually, I was on a trek. When I came back from the trek, I said, this happened, that happened. And I think there was a huge misunderstanding, because if you read the text very carefully, it's certainly not what the media here projected. So, that's all I wanted to say on this issue. On the question of the blockade, again, Mr. Devesh Jha has raised this issue. So look at the context at that time and look at the historical development of the constitution-making process in Nepal. So over the last 2 or 3 decades, Nepal has gone through a lot of turmoil. You have had a huge Maoist insurgency. You have had Madhesi agitations. In settlement of these andolans and agitations, there were solemn agreements entered into by the leadership of Nepal with the agitating parties. And one way or the other, India was also associated with these agreements. So the expectation was that when a new constitution is going to be drafted, this would be a people's constitution, this was drafted by elected representatives of the people of Nepal, probably one of the few countries in the world where it was elected representatives who drafted the constitution. So the expectation was that all these solemn agreements that have been entered into would find accommodation in the constitution. And the problems began because a perception developed amongst certain communities that the understandings with them have not been incorporated into the constitution. So why should this matter to India? 2 reasons. One, India was associated with those agreements, with the resolution of these problems. And so I've said in our book, we were a kind of neutral referee. And the number of times during my tenure, I was told by leaders of various groups that you have betrayed us. It is because, we had confidence that you would support these agreements. We have signed these solemn agreements, and now you have, you're no longer interested in these. So many times. So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at the historical development of Nepal, and this is not interference in internal affairs, that's the way our history has developed. And you cannot disregard. And second point, what is India's interest in Nepal? So for India, I think the critical objective is peace and stability, and especially since we have open borders. If there is disturbance and internal instability in Nepal, then we have seen, we've all experienced it. It also Nepal, of course, suffers, but it also spills over across the border into India. So it is in India's interest that there is stability and peace in Nepal. And in this society, where there have been such huge agitations for a greater, a more equitable sharing of political and economic power in the country, our sense was, and this is what I think our leadership also conveyed in their public statements and messages, our Prime Minister, when he came here, had said, हर व्यक्ति को ऐसा लगे कि इस फूल के गुलदस्ते में मेरे पुष्प की भी खुशबू है. So everybody in Nepal takes full ownership and pride in the constitution. So this was the constant message that India was giving: accommodate the interests and concerns of everyone. So, well, I don't want to go into, what happened, why happened. I've mentioned some of the things in the book, but that is where India's involvement was. It was not prescriptive. It was only this friendly advice that please accommodate the concerns of everyone. And I think that is the framework in which we were operating. And obviously we know what happened after that. And Devesh ji ne kaha ki India ne blockade kiya. This was the perception in Nepal, very much so. But if you look historically, this has been the perception in Nepal since 1950. At the time when King Tribhuvan went into exile in India, this was the same feeling here, that India is anti-Nepal. During the Panchayat Kal, when King Mahendra abolished multi-party democracy, and the Nepali Congress and the great leaders of the Nepali Congress were in exile in India, the propaganda here was that India is supporting these, these are Indian agents. India is supporting these people. India is creating problems for Nepal by supporting Nepali Congress leaders. Same thing during the Maoist insurgency. I was dealing with Nepal at that time, and I know the perception in Nepal was India is supporting the Maoists, India is providing them arms, India is providing them material assistance. India wants to keep Nepal in, a state of turmoil, controlled instability. Same thing during the Madhesi agitation. India is funding the vigilante groups. So, there is this perception, and I can understand it because of the asymmetry in the size. This is part of the psychological aspect of the relationship, and it's a human tendency also. It's always easy to blame somebody else. So, so we have to take this in our stride. Certainly, we had sympathy for the objective of an inclusive constitution, because it was our assessment that it is only an inclusive constitution that will bring about durable stability in Nepal. And what happened subsequently, of course, I think we are aware of. I don't want to get into it. On the open border, Mr. Budinarayan Shrestha, and I have great respect. So I agree with what Swami Arunji has said. I think the open border is a great asset to our relationship. And I believe in broad security. I don't believe in cold security, which is, the peace of the graveyard. I believe in security that comes through mutually interdependent, socially connected, happy population living on the two sides of the border, rather than a cold policed border with fences and, gun-bearing, gun-toting soldiers and so on. That's not the tradition between India and Nepal. The tradition between India and Nepal is of great friendship. And this is what we tell our border guarding forces. The India-Nepal border is not like the border with Pakistan. So your mentality has to be different. This is an open, friendly border. It's a great asset to our relationship. Of course, it's misused, and we have evidence of the misuse. But the response to that is not that you close the border. The response to that is that you strengthen intelligence cooperation. You strengthen cooperation between the border guarding forces. You strengthen cooperation between the DMs and the CDOs. And that is the way to provide security. The ID cards episode, we have tried it. In Nepalganj, I think in 2002, Nepalganj, Rupedia, we had tried this. It was impossible. The number of times an individual crosses the border between India and Nepal every day, there's no way. Can you imagine thousands of people crossing the border? If you have to sit and start examining everybody's ID card, what chaos there is going to be? I mean, it's just practically impossible. And I really don't think that that is the kind of relationship that we have. Why is South Asia not developed? It's a very interesting question. And I think this has to do with the policies that we set in train. And also to do with the fact that we have Finance Minister Mahat with us, but also has to do with the fact that we are perhaps the least integrated, economically integrated region in the world. And I think the only way for us to grow is to grow together. And, so we have to look at we have to develop an open, interconnected, interdependent economic space where the comparative advantage of each country is exploited to the full. And, we are talking about development of regional supply chains and things like that. So I really think this is the way to go. And I think, somebody referred to the electricity issue, which is very valid. We have to look at electricity sale from Nepal to Bangladesh as of great importance and strategically, because this is integrating our whole region together. So it's going to make all of us much stronger and improve relations. So rather than, counting rupees and paise so much, I think we need to look at these things more strategically. And, I say the same thing with Pancheshwar, which is something I've been trying to push, and I hope something happens. That will transform the relationship. As I think Arun 3, which is doing very well in the Solukhumbu region, in eastern Nepal, I think that will also do extremely well. I think the point about border personnel is well taken, and I think we have to drill into the minds of border personnel that this is a friendly border. It's not an inimical border. Whether the constitution I couldn't understand, was it India's failure about the constitution? I don't know. I don't think so. It was a constitution of the people of Nepal. they have to draw it up. So I didn't quite understand. A new perspective, old perspective. So I think both are important. I don't think, as Swamiji said, you cannot think of India-Nepal relations without emphasizing the cultural, the civilizational, and the religious underpinnings and the links. This is the bedrock of the relationship. But this is not sufficient in today's day and age. You have to build on this foundation by by injecting a huge economic overlay on this relationship, and that's really the way to go forward. And as as I've said in the book also, it's the youth that will really carry this relationship forward. And so I think, the two governments really need to focus on strengthening this engagement between the youth. I think I've spoken for too long. I apologize in case. Yes, on the boundary, I did want to say, and I want to thank Professor Sundar Maniji and Ambassador Jairaj Acharya for taking the trouble to make such important and very valid points. But on the boundary issue, I want to say something. I don't know if I think the audience here may not like it, but see, the way we looked at what happened in Nepal. So one fine day, Nepal publishes a new map which incorporates several territories, several Indian territories. And that map is then endorsed through a constitutional amendment in Parliament. And we are not given any evidence, at least in the public domain, as to why this has been done. All we are told is that, look, you have produced a map which we don't like. You have shown Kalapani as Indian territory, and we don't accept this. And then we get this new map. I'm simplifying it, but that's the way we saw it, and without any evidence given to us. So tomorrow if somebody says, no, this is my territory, this is not your territory, I'm going to put it in my map. It was something like that. And so people are saying, why aren't we negotiating? Why aren't we talking? Why aren't we discussing this issue? So you tell me, if somebody takes your territory today, publishes a new map, and then says, okay, now I'm prepared to talk to you about this. This is a dispute, we'll talk about it. So what is the response that you expect from the other side? So this issue, I'm afraid, has become very complex. And the other question, and I've put this in my book, in the mind, see, you have a constitutional amendment. Now your delegation that comes to India, or the Indian delegation comes here, so we need the confidence that whatever settlement is arrived at finally will be endorsed by your parliament. Now, can your official delegation give that commitment? So this issue has become extremely complicated, and I don't see, how this is going to be resolved. But, so you must see it from our perspective. And the reason I've written this, it's quite a detailed chapter, and I'm delighted we have Mr. Budinarayan Shrestha here, and I'm sure in future he'll respond to the arguments I've made in my chapter, so that, perhaps there can be a debate. But as far as we are concerned, I think I've quoted chapter and verse in my book in terms of how these territories have always belonged to India. And, so a fair amount of research has gone into it, and I would love to hear a different perspective from the Nepalese side. But the point is that, in our relationship, which is so close and intimate, there's bound to be friction. You always have friction when you have such a close relationship. So the challenge before us, or our goal, is really to try and ensure that this friction doesn't develop into irritants, which basically means we should try and resolve the elements of disagreement. And I think those have to be done through transparency, through open discussions, and also by educating the public, in both countries in terms of developing the sentiment and an atmosphere in which these things can be resolved. I think I've spoken for too long, and maybe since I'm a free man, I don't represent the government of India, so please, whatever I've said is in my personal capacity. It does not represent the views of the government of India. These are my personal views, and you're free to, accept them or reject them or, discuss them with me. So I do want to make that very clear. Thank you very much.
ए तपाईलाई थाहा छ यहाँ त Indian embassy बाट चाहिँ त पुलिस को IGP पनि भन्दा रहेछन् Indian embassy बाट भनेर जब मैं सुने, that was the first time I came to know that such a book existed. I was quite keen to know what it was, and then Prem Laskari ji was kind enough to send me the book. He asked me, have you read it? I said, no, I don't have it. Then he said, okay, I'll send you one. Now, what I find is, you see, the book is extensively written. It touches on every single aspect of Nepal-India relationship, right at the grassroots level, at the topmost level. Here you have got such honesty. The honesty is absolutely transparent, and I can say it is absolutely honesty because many of the incidents that he's talking about, I also have been involved in some of those, and I know for a fact. Example, when the constitution was being promulgated, he has mentioned that they had asked for a delay because the Madhesi leaders and the Janjatis, they wanted some time to thrash out the problems. And we, in the Nagri Samaj, we decided to go and talk to Subhash Nemma. He was chief then. We went there, went to his office, went to Samvidhan Sabhako building ma gaera. Hami bhanem, Subhash ji, kei din lai pani ek hafta lai matte stagit garnus. Don't do it. It will be a problem. Vandakeri. उहाँले हामीलाई के भन्नुभयो जवाफ यही हो कि चाहिँ के गरौँ ओलीजी मान्नु हुन्न. That was the answer we got. So when he says that they had asked, they also had asked for the same. We had done the same. So what he is speaking is absolute fact. That should be. Another thing about his honesty is when Modi ji asks him about the Shakti Peeths of Nepal, and he says, I don't know. You see, he could have given a told-matol answer. But he said, I don't know. To the Prime Minister of India, he says, Nepal no Shakti Peeth. Modi ji is an expert on that. I mean, Hindutva, who can challenge him? In fact, Ambassador Rae was warned by the Foreign Secretary, brush up your Hindutva. And unfortunately, I think he did not. So he got trapped by Mr. Modi. So you see, and humorous aspect, he talks about the different functions that are accorded to India. I mean, it's India relations, Nepal relations. He says people are called on the dais, Asan Grahan ko. He talks about the Asan Grahan. It's such a humorous point. He says half the audience comes on the dais, and half the audience comes. He says, sometimes I'm afraid that the manch will just collapse. And then he says, the ones who get closest to the Indian ambassador, his height is the topmost. So everybody wants to be close to the chief guest. So he talks about these things. But now, these are some of the lighter aspects of this. But now let me tell you, he has spoken very, very in depth of some of our leaders. I won't go into the details. But definitely what I find in that is a lot of hypocrisy. Baira, anti-Indian, Indian like talk. Bhitar any wine and dine with the ambassador or with any dignitaries of Nepal or India in a hotel or in some private homes. This is a typical attitude which I have seen in many of the leaders that I'm reading here. We knew about such things, never really had it from the horse's mouth, but here I got something there. Now, he has spoken of some of the historical figures, political figures, and our religious figures in our relationship. And he has some of the things I never knew. For example, he says Rana Bahadur Shah had been a monk, a yogi, a Swami Nirgunananda, who later became Rana Bahadur Shah, the king of Nepal. I didn't know that. I did not know that Wazir Ali Shah's wife, Hazrat Mahal, is buried right over in Kathmandu Valley. I didn't know that. See, there is in-depth information on even such personality. Guru Nanak, for example, how many of us know that Guru Nanak actually was in Kathmandu? There is a shrine dedicated to him next to Pashupati, as he talks about it. One of the kings, maybe Rana Bahadur Shah himself, had given a plot of land for building Nanak Kujaini or Panth. He had given land. We didn't know all these things, you see. So there are in-depth information what we Nepalese did not know. यो पनि पढ्नु लायककै कुराहरू छ के. अब he talks about पशुपतिनाथले, I mean we Nepalese they mosque, हाम्रो चाहिँ mosque कस्तुरी चाहिँ नि जगन्नाथ टेम्पललाई दिँदा रहेछ. I didn't know it. र इन्डियाले sandalwood पशुपतिनाथलाई दिँदा रहेछ. I didn't know this. How many of us knew this? कि कस्तुरी हामी चाहिँ जगन्नाथ टेम्पल पठाउँदै रहेछ. I didn't know that. He has mentioned that. Now, these are some of the social, cultural ties that he has spoken about. Then, of course, comes to some more detailed things. He has given about the border disputes, extensively worked out papers he has directly quoted. Letters, understandings between the British government, British East India Company, and later the British government. He has quoted them absolutely in detail. But then, having said all that, obviously he speaks from the Indian point of view. But the nice thing is, that's probably where the dilemma comes in, you see. He has given a loophole where he suggests that there are points where Nepal can also take up the issue and, fight it out. I mean, not fight it out, but discuss it out. Ab Lipula ke yo Kalapani kura gardakheri, he has mentioned in one place a very interesting thing. What he says is this. This I must quote to you. It is true in the past, and quote, Kuti Yangti. Kuti Yangti was the name given to the Kali River. Kuti Yangti was actually, even now, that's one of the head points, let's say a tributary, a large tributary, which was called the Kali River by some people, and that was the disputed area. That still is the disputed area. The Kali River has got a very small head base, but the Kati Yungti has got the bigger one. Now, what he says is, the British East India Company till 1860, in 1817, the fact that the Kuti Yangti was considered to be the Kali River, he says, British East India Company till 1860, in spite of the 1870 rejection by Captain Webb, he says, still the issue was left open. So East India Company ले चाहिँ 1860 सम्म पनि हाम्रै point of view गरेको छ. जब चाहिँ 1817 मा चाहिँ नि Captain Webb जो चाहिँ नि त्यसमा he was representing East India Company, he has done a detailed study. He had rejected it, but 1860 सम्म the fact is that was considered. But हाम्रो नेपालको त्यो फेभरमा छ. अब यो यस्तो पोइन्टहरु हाम्रो सरकारले we have got to do our homework. हामीले homework नगरी अगाडि बढ्यौं भनेदेखि we'll be lost, because they have done detailed studies. But Ambassador Rae, it seems, has left us a point where from which we can develop. And here we have got, I think, our ex-chief of the survey department of our government. He is there. I think he can shed light on that. But the point is, there has been we have got a loophole by which we can say, yes, in spite of all the different letters, all the different understandings, there is a point where up to 1860, the East India Company recognizes the Kali River as the one that we know as the one that we know as Kali. The Kuti Yangti is still considered valid for us. So, हाम्रो अहिलेको पनि ओलीजीको जुन चुच्चे नक्सा भएको छ त्यो कुटी याङटीको हिसाबमा छ. So therefore, there we have got a loophole. That's one thing. He speaks extensively about the China-India relationship, and he is now clearly says, अब नेपालको सम्बन्ध इन्डियासँग, the third factor is going to be there for always. That is China factor. You cannot neglect the China factor in any equation that Nepal and India has. He's mentioned that very clearly. भनेपछि उले के उहाँले के भन्नुहुन्छ भनेदेखि हामी नै इन चाइनासँग यति कोअपरेसन गरिरहेका छौं, and his word is this, उहाँले के भन्नुहुन्छ भनेदेखि about this, he says, हामी cooperation with China, India has got cooperation, competition, confrontation, but we must not be conflictual भनेर उहाँले भन्नुभएको छ. So इन्डियाको relationship with China त्यो हिसाबमा छ. What? Cooperation, competition, confrontation, but not conflictual. That's what they are striving for. So नेपालको सिचुएसनमा अब उहाँले एडभाइस दिनुहुन्छ इन्डियाले चाहिँ नि, don't consider every action of Nepal to be anti-Indian. If they are tilting towards China, it's not a big problem. The fact is, China factor will always be there. I mean, that sort of pragmatic approach is extremely important because not even suspicion. Hamle je gare pani China chai ढल्क्यो, जे गरे पनि यो Chinese को यो भयो. That sort of an attitude change देखिन्छ यहाँ. So अब यो कुरा चाहिँ नि is as much an advice to the government of India as also telling us to look, I understand Nepal's point of view, but enough material is here in which government of India le pani, they should read this book thoroughly because, as he says, many things the higher ups in the bureaucracy do not understand. Example दिउँ, हाम्रो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी कुरा आउँदाखेरि चाहिँ नि, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी हामीले जब यो हाइड्रोपावर कुरा आउँदाखेरि we wanted to sell our electricity to Bangladesh. They were giving us better rates and we were selling to them they were giving us in dollars. तर त्यहाँ some bureaucrat out of his intelligence के गर्छ भनेदेखि, no, you cannot sell to Bangladesh, you have got to sell it to us and then in rupees and then we will sell to Bangladesh in dollars. त्यतिसम्म पनि यहाँ भएको रहेछ. And he has said that sort of approach is very narrow-minded. That should not happen. पछि that was rectified. But the point is, यस्तो narrow-minded कुरा छ. Now he advises the government of India, in the Home Ministry, a cell has been created for border management. त्यो भएको रहेछ. Now त्यसमा he is clearly mentioned कि चाहिँ यस्तो त भएको छ, but खालि इन्डियन्सहरु मात्रै बस्नु गर्दा के काम लाग्दैन. Involve Nepalese officials there. Get कसरी नेपालसँगको अफिसरसँग कोअपरेसन गरेर अगाडि बढ्ने, नत्र भने त it will be useless, one-sided हुन्छ. That will not do. So here, त्यतिसम्म पनि उहाँले he has advised the government of India कि you must understand नेपालको सिचुएसन भनेर. अहिले भएको छ हाम्रो त्यो जुन अहिले होम मिनिस्ट्रीमा छ, नेपालसँग कोअर्डिनेसन भावे देख्छ. अहिले यो ट्विन काण्ड जुन धामीको काण्ड, त्यो would have just passed off. That means something concrete would have happened and it would not have been, it was through a hue and cry हुँदैन थियो. We'd have got our compensation, they would have punished, India would have punished the border police who did such a mischief, I would say murder. They would have punished them by now. But then त्यो खालको सिचुएसन चाहिँ नि यहाँ देखिएन के. त्यसैले what we have to understand is they are trying to understand us and we also must sometimes understand. We must also understand India's point of view and they are trying to understand us also. त्यो पनि हामी बुझ्नु पर्छ. Now what he has said is, now in all this there is one chapter there which must be read by everybody, the epilogue. The epilogue chapter, it's quite a long one, but there the gist of his whole advice, it's equally to the government of India and to us also. It tells us so much about what we should do, and his experience there is extraordinary. You see, for example, when he talks about the constitution writing, he says, India we were not involved in this your border ko nakabandi ma. This was done by the Madheska Netaharu, though who were very dissatisfied. They went and did it. Tara blame sabai hamlai ayo. Yo sabai hamlai aunu parne the na. Why should that happen to us? I mean, why are we at the receiving end, Matrisa? You see, he has given us, I would say, the truth of but we had been saying all along कि लोग यो त नेपाली हाम्रो नेताहरूले गरेका हुन्. Why are we belittling our own हाम्रो मधेसी नेताहरूलाई? अनि भन्दाखेरि ओ एकदम इन्डियाले गर्यो भन्थे. That's not true. It was उनीहरूको त लाइन रक्सोलको लाइन त वहाँ सीतामढीसम्म पुगिरहेको थियो. So त्यो समस्या त्यो पनि थियो कि. त्यसैले overall what I found is he has in depth he has gone to the whole thing. He has given us enough material to, in fact, to discuss with proper research and our own works about Lipu Lake and Kalapani ko pani. China ko barema, it is well discussed, and it is final, let me tell you, he is surprised, he is amazed. Why isn't Nepal developing? यति हुँदा हुँदै China is there. हामी इन्डियाको यत्रो चाहिँ हाम्रो उत्थान भएको छ इकोनोमिक्समा. Why isn't Nepal taking that help? किन Nepal still चाहिँ is not developed? भुटानको GDP 3 times नेपालको किन छ त? He is sad. मैले हेर्दाखेरि he is sad. He is amazed. He is surprised. It's a fact हो. इन्डियाको यत्रो चाहिँ नि एडभान्स छ, भर्चुअली सुपर पावर भएको छ. चाइनासँग हामी लिन सक्दैन, त्यता पनि हामीले पुरा लिन सकेका छैनौँ. But इन्डियाले त ओपन border थियो. So he says, why is Nepal having 1/3 the GDP of Bhutan? So you see, sadness, amazement, surprise, advice, honesty, all this is there. And also, without any, he is not trying to please anybody. He's left, his ambassador post is gone. He's not trying to please anybody. He doesn't worry about criticism. He has given a very honest book that we all should read. It's worth reading, and especially the governments, people in government must read this book. It's very, very important. Thank you. Thank you very much.